Ah yes, Treasure Planet, that Disney animated film that seems to forever be stuck in underrated purgatory. I've always loved this film, and so have many others, but it just can't catch a break. I mean, so many people have called it underrated over the years, that I almost hesitate to say it's underrated these days, except there still manages to always be that one person who pops up every now and again and says it's not that good or it's something like that, and so I guess it will just forever be underrated. But I want to prove to you why it's so good, and I think the best way to do that is to simply focus on the main villain of this movie, or should I say antagonist, since he isn't just pure evil. Now obviously I am talking about Long John Silver here, one of my personal favorite Disney villains of all time. And can I just say right off the bat, one of my favorite details about Long John Silver is the super cool blend on his animation between 2D and 3D. And it just works so amazingly well here, since all of his sort of natural, fleshy, alien body and clothes and all that stuff is traditionally hand-drawn, but his cyborg limbs are done with CGI. And I think this is really clever because the CGI kind of has a more stiff look to it, and the three-dimensional look of it makes it feel more futuristic compared to the 2D. It's genuinely amazing to watch, and it matches so well too. Like, there's not any moment where it looks out of place or like it doesn't fit in with the scene. The animators did an outstanding job on this character, and not to mention just all his great facial expressions that managed to capture so many emotions and show why he's such an in-depth character. I think it's also worth noting that Long John Silver in this movie, compared to his original Treasure Island book counterpart, I think is a more interesting character. Now, Long John Silver in the original book did occasionally be nice to Jim Hawkins, but on the whole he was a bit more of a villainous character overall. He's clearly in it for himself, even when he does good things, like saving Jim's life during the final third of the book. You can tell that his main priority is still just saving himself. And so even when he does a good deed, it never really comes off as though he's changed as a person for the better, if you know what I'm saying. Whereas Long John Silver in this movie feels much more like an actually redeemed character. Someone who honestly does change by the end to become a better person. So I genuinely think that Long John Silver in this movie is an improvement over his book counterpart. And I think that should count for something. You know, on top of the fact that he just has a really entertaining personality to watch.
If you'll pardon my plain speaking, gentlemen, are you all... Start reading! Totally blinking daft!
Like, this man steals every scene that he's in. The actor, whose name I'm totally blanking on at the moment, has done such a marvelous job with voicing this character. Like, he truly brings him to life, and he has all that piratey energy, without feeling generic for a second.
You cut me to the quick, Captain. I speaks nothing but me heart at all times.
And now, as for his main plotline and what makes him so great overall as a character, allow me to explain. I think from the start it's interesting to note that Jim Hawkins is thrust onto Long John Silver as his cabin boy, and it's something that neither character really wants. But that's part of what makes the relationship interesting and believable. It's kind of the same reason why most people find romance stories that aren't just love at first sight more interesting. You gotta have a little bit of that tension in there, you know? To truly build a believable friendship, the characters have to agree on some things but also heavily disagree on other things, and come to terms with each other's differences. But the interesting twist here is that Jim Hawkins doesn't have the whole picture at first, and that Long John Silver, well, his difference in this case heavily contradicts Jim Hawkins' desire, and so it is technically impossible for both of them to get what they want, and fully come to terms with each other while both gaining their goals in the end. One of them will have to forfeit what they want, if not both. I also like that very early on, Jim Hawkins basically knows that Long John Silver is the villain.
We best be keeping a sharp eye on this one, eh, Morph? We wouldn't want him straying into things he shouldn't.
And so, Long John has to put in that effort to try and prove to Jim that he isn't really some secret criminal like he actually is. And this cuts deep because it means that, you know, later on, when the truth comes out, it hits Jim even harder because it makes it feel like everything Long John said was just a trick to get him onto his side and cover up his true plan. And, you know, speaking of Long John Silver's true plan, that being the plan of all the pirates on this ship, commit mutiny, steal the ship, and take all the treasure for themselves, is a completely self-centered idea and it places themselves over all other people in the equation. And the secondary antagonist of this movie, Scroop over here, is a perfect example of the kind of person that Long John Silver would be if he continued to go through with his plan and didn't value for a second anyone else involved, since all Scroop cares about is getting the treasure. It doesn't matter who has to die for him to get it. But of course, along the way, Long John Silver discovers something interesting. While talking with Jim and trying to trick him into thinking that he's actually a good guy, he realizes that there is actually a genuine bond between the two of them, because Jim is not like what he expected. There's something missing in his life, that being the lack of a true father to be there for him and take care of him and understand him when he has issues and struggles. And initially, Long John Silver thinks that this is a perfect opportunity to slot himself into Jim Hawkins' life and fill that void as the perfect way to trick him into trusting him. But while doing this, he doesn't realize that he actually enjoys filling that void in Jim Hawkins' life much more than he could have imagined. And Jim, too, also ends up seeing Long John in that role. And the two of them really come together and bond as if they were father and son. Eventually, Long John opens up to Jim about a little bit of what his true desires are without, fully spilling the beans. That he has dreams he's always wanted to achieve, but along the way, it's cost him stuff, like his 2 limbs. And I think this is a great way to foreshadow that if he wants to get that treasure in the end, it will have to cost him something else. And he knows that if he really does want to achieve his dream, he's going to have to cut off this connection and bond he's starting to grow with Jim Hawkins, because of the fact that their 2 goals of both wanting the treasure, but for completely different reasons, contradict each other and they both can't win. And Long John knows there's no way to change Jim's mind about his desires. He'll never side with him if he knew he was a pirate. And I think a lovely little detail that shows subtly just how attached Long John Silver has grown to Jim is during the black hole scene when everyone is about to be sucked in and absorbed. And then, they escape at the last second. Very epic scene, I must say. Long John Silver is seen protecting Jim and holding him down from the explosion. And it seems to me that he's doing this almost subconsciously, without realizing it. He's grown so attached to Jim that he naturally wants to protect him without realizing that's even what he's doing. But alas, despite his growing fondness of Jim Hawkins, and the genuine true bond that has built up between the two of them, one of the most powerful forces in the universe catches up to Long John Silver and forces him back down that initial road he was planning to take. Social pressure.
I care about one thing and one thing only. Flint's throne. You think I'd risk it all for the sake of some nose-wiping little whelp?
Yes, when push comes to shove, Long John shoves his relationship with Jim Hawkins into the trash can because he's afraid of being judged by the other people who know him. And so because he's determined to keep his old reputation, thinking that that's who he is and if he lets it go, he's a nobody, he goes full throttle into pirate mode. Unlucky for him though, Jim overheard the whole thing. And, this barrel scene, I used to think it was pretty dumb, but it actually happens to be a scene that was in the original book, so it's kind of hard to criticize it in that sense since this is an adaptation. Blame Robert Louis Stevenson, not the writers and directors of this movie, if, you've got a problem with the coincidental nature of this barrel scene. Anyway, I like that even after Long John betrays Jim, he still can't bring himself to shoot him and kill him. Even though that would be the easiest thing to do, and it would assure him all the treasure that he ever wanted, everything he dreamed of, and yet, for some reason, he can't do it. He can't pull that trigger. There's something inside him telling him that Jim Hawkins is more valuable than what he thinks he wants, but he just can't see it. His next step, seeing that Jim and a couple of the others have survived this attack, is to go and barter with them. He tries to win Jim back over to his side, seeing as how he spared him, and deep down is still fond of him, and doesn't want to kill him. But the problem is, he directly betrayed Jim, and made it seem like everything he ever said to him and that bond he built with him was all just a lie and fake. And he can't just win him back over as if his choice to fold under social pressure meant nothing.
I didn't mean a word of it. That bloodthirsty lot had thought I'd gone soft. They'd have gutted us both.
It has consequences. You can't just flip-flop back and forth between two different sides. You have to know what's right and stick to that. Or in some cases, stick to what's wrong and face the consequences. And it really makes this moment sting a lot, since you know that Long John doesn't want to see Jim Hawkins so upset like this, but he feels like he has no choice at this point. He's made his decision and there is no going back. In his mind, he tries to tell himself that Jim isn't worth it, and that he's so close to getting the treasure that he just needs to finish this mission and get over it. And I think it's interesting that upon the moment he finally does reach that treasure he searched his whole life to find, and he grasps it within his hands, that there's something about that tangible, physical feeling of the treasure he's been searching for his whole life, that, while special in its own right, doesn't quite live up to one's imagination. And I think that's why he starts to realize that there is a lot of value in Jim that he didn't see before, because that highly perceived value of the treasure he was searching for his whole life seemed even greater in his mind than it actually was. But the value of Jim has always stayed the same, if not gotten better over time in his mind. But it's a hard choice, because if he lets that treasure go, then it'll mean giving up something he has spent his whole life building up towards. But if he chooses the treasure over Jim, then he'll never get Jim back. And he'll potentially miss out on everything wonderful that could come in the future because of his choice to choose Jim over the treasure. And so we end up in this movie's most pivotal, important scene. Long John Silver's final decision. The treasure he searched for, or the treasure of Jim Hawkins? And you know, this choice right here, it really reminds me of one of my favorite Jesus quotes. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And in this moment, Long John Silver finally realizes that the true treasure he's been searching for is not the kind of treasure he can grasp within his hands, the kind you can spend and sell, but rather a treasure that lasts forever. The treasure of love and friendship. Something that he and Jim have never truly had or found before. But in their fatherly bond, they were able to offer something to each other that they both desperately needed, whether they realized it or not. And so, Long John lets go of his lifelong dream.
Literally.
And chooses Jim instead.
Oh, blast me for a foe!
And it leads to one of the most wonderful moments of this whole movie. Not just this epic finale that's happening all around the characters, but this one little line from Long John Silver earlier in the movie when he's bonding with Jim.
And when the time comes, you get the chance to really test the cut of your sails and show what you're made of. Well, I hope I'm there, catching some of the light coming off you that day.
I love how perfectly encapsulated that is in this moment right here. In choosing Jim over the treasure, he gets to see that moment he desperately wanted to see while bonding with Jim. And if he had chosen the treasure over Jim, he never would have gotten to see Jim's full potential. And that moment right there is more valuable than any treasure he could have ever wanted. And last but not least, in the end, Long John runs away because he knows that the law will catch up with him. His crimes cannot go overlooked even though he's had a change of heart. But he's still desperate to escape. And in this final scene, I think it's amazing that both of these two characters, in their final bonding with each other, each give one final gift to each other. Long John parts with some of the very last pieces of treasure he was able to salvage from Treasure Planet, and gives it to Jim instead, because he knows that that is a worthwhile investment. And in return, you know, whether or not he had just given him treasure, of course, Jim saves Long John's life by letting him escape, knowing that because of his change of heart, there is truly a chance for his redemption, and he wants to see him grow into the best version of himself, just as Long John wants to see Jim Hawkins become the best version of himself. And so, I love how poetic it is that Long John saved Jim's life, and Jim, in the end, saved his life. And all in all, Long John Silver is an outstanding character amongst the Disney roster, and will always be one of my favorite Disney villains of all time, from one of my favorite, most underrated Disney movies of all time. Now I would like to give a massive thank you to all my supporters on Patreon, as well as my channel members, who support me in an extra way, and as a bonus, they get videos slightly early before everyone else does, and their names listed up here in the ending section. Anyway, if you're still sticking around, then why don't you check out one of my other videos? I mean, I've got a whole playlist of villain analysis videos you can check out if you've missed any of my previous uploads. And if you're not interested in that, then, well, I've been covering like all sorts of Walt Disney Animation Studios films, of which Treasure Planet is one of. So perhaps you'd be interested to hear my thoughts on one of those other movies. So check out that playlist then. But most importantly of all, always remember to be iconic.